Have you ever been so certain you were right that you stopped listening to anyone around you? Have you ever walked into a room and felt, deep in your chest, that you were above the people in it? That your success, your position, your achievements had placed you on a different level than the rest? If you have felt that, even for a moment, even in a way you would never admit out loud, then this story was made for you. There is a particular kind of loneliness that comes with pride. It is not loud. It does not announce itself. It settles in quietly, like dust on a high shelf. And by the time you notice it, it has been there for years. It makes you feel powerful on the outside, while something essential withers on the inside. And the terrifying thing about pride is this: it always convinces you that you are the one person who doesn't have it. But today I want to tell you about a king who had more power than he could count and less peace than the poorest man in his kingdom. And what a simple farmer said to him one ordinary morning, 4 words, just 4 words, changed everything. Stay with me until the very end. Because the most important part of this story is not about the king, it is about you. There was once a kingdom set between 2 mountain ranges, in a valley so wide and green that travelers who came over the eastern pass would stop their horses at the ridge and simply stare. The valley floor was crossed by a river, the color of deep jade, and on its banks, the capital city had grown over the centuries into a place of marble and carved stone, of towers and gardens, of markets that smelled of saffron and cedar, and fresh bread baking in clay ovens before sunrise. It was, by every measure that mattered to the people who measured such things, a magnificent place. And at the center of it all, in a palace with 40 rooms and a courtyard where peacocks walked freely across white stone tiles, lived King Aldrich. He was not an old man. He was not yet 50. His hair was still dark, his shoulders still broad, and when he walked through the halls of his palace, the servants pressed themselves against the walls and looked at the floor, not because they had been instructed to, but because something in the way he moved made it feel like the correct thing to do. He had ruled for 22 years. He had expanded the kingdom's borders twice. He had built 3 new roads, a great library, and a dam that had ended the flooding of the southern villages. By any account, he had done more good than most kings who had sat on that throne before him, and he knew it. That was the thing about Aldrich. He did not merely know what he had accomplished, he wore that knowledge the way some men wear armor. It was always present, always between him and other people. When advisors spoke in council, he would listen for a moment, then finish their sentences. When merchants brought petitions, he would grant or dismiss them before they had fully explained their situation, because he had already decided. When his chief general once came to him with a concern about the eastern border, Aldrich had waved his hand and said, "I have already thought about this. It is handled." He was rarely wrong, which made it worse. Because a man who is rarely wrong and knows it begins to believe that the distance between himself and other people is not merely circumstantial, he begins to believe it is essential, that it is who he is, that the gap is deserved. Aldrich had a son named Cale, 15 years old, quiet and watchful in the way that children of powerful parents often are always observing, rarely asking, and a wife, Queen Mira, who had long since learned that the way to peace in the palace was not to challenge her husband directly, but to plant ideas like seeds and wait, sometimes for seasons, to see if they took root. She had planted one such seed 6 months before this story truly begins. She had said to Aldrich very quietly one evening after dinner, "You should visit the villages more, not as a king on procession, just as a man. Walk among your people without the guards and the banners and the ceremony. See what they actually carry." Aldrich had smiled the smile of a man who finds an idea charming but unnecessary. He had said, "I know my people. I built the dam that saved their fields. I paved the roads their children walked to school. I know exactly what they carry." And that had been the end of it. Until the morning, everything changed, though no one in the palace knew it yet. It began with a dream. Aldrich did not put much stock in dreams, which was why this one unsettled him. He had dreamed that he was standing in the center of his great courtyard, and all 40 rooms of the palace were open and full of light, and every advisor and general and merchant and noble was there. Hundreds of people, and they were all talking, all moving, all alive with purpose. And he was standing in the middle of all of it, and no one was looking at him. Not a single person. And he was not angry in the dream. He was simply invisible. He stood there, surrounded by the world he had built, and felt that he had somehow become a ghost inside it. He woke before sunrise, lay in the dark, and did not understand what the dream meant. He told no one, but it followed him through the morning like a shadow that stayed even when the sun was overhead. That afternoon, on an impulse he could not fully explain, Aldrich told his head steward he was going for a ride alone, without escort. The steward's face performed a careful rearrangement of its features, and he said, "Of course, Your Majesty." The king rode out through the eastern gate of the city, wearing a plain wool riding coat and no crown, and within an hour, he had left the paved road and was moving along a dirt track between fields of barley that swayed in the late autumn wind like a slow, golden tide. He had not been alone in the countryside in years. He had forgotten what it smelled like. The air was different out here, heavier, earthier, cut through with the green smell of irrigation ditches and the faint sweetness of wood smoke from farmhouses beginning their evening fires. He rode until he reached a farmstead at the edge of a small orchard apple trees, their leaves turning amber and red, and dismounted to let his horse drink from a stone trough near the fence. That was when he saw the farmer. The man was perhaps 60 years old. His hands, when he rested them on the fence post near the trough, were the hands of someone who had worked outside every day for 40 years, dark, thick-knuckled, scarred along the thumb from some old tool. He was not large. He was not impressive in any way that Aldrich would normally have noticed. But he was looking at the king, not at a king, because he did not know Aldrich was a king with a directness and ease that was unusual. Most people, even when they did not know who Aldrich was, seemed to sense something and looked away first. This man did not look away. He said, "Long ride?" Aldrich said, "Long enough." The farmer nodded and said nothing for a while. Then he said, watching the horse drink, "You look like a man who hasn't been still in a very long time." Aldrich almost said, "I am always still. I am composed and decisive and in command of every room I enter." But something, perhaps the open air, perhaps the dream still sitting at the edge of his thoughts, made him say instead, "Perhaps you're right." The farmer's name was Doran. He offered Aldrich a cup of tea from a small fire he had going near the barn, and Aldrich, who had not sat on a log to drink tea from a clay cup in 20 years, sat on a log and drank tea from a clay cup, and something in him that had been clenched for a very long time began, almost imperceptibly, to loosen. They talked about small things at first: the weather, the barley harvest, whether the river would flood this winter. Aldrich found himself listening in a way he had not listened to anyone in years. Not waiting for his turn to speak, not preparing his response, just listening. It was strange. It felt almost like resting. Then Doran said something that made Aldrich put his cup down. He said, "I used to think that having more was the same as becoming more. When I was young, I wanted more land, more grain, more animals. I thought the man with the most was the most. And then one harvest I had, my best year ever, more grain than I'd ever stored, more coin than I'd ever saved. And I sat down to eat dinner that night and I realized I'd eaten the same meal every evening for 30 years, and the taste had not changed at all. The meal tasted exactly the same whether I had nothing in the store or whether the barn was full. And I thought, what have I been chasing?" Aldrich said nothing. He was looking at the orchard. Doran said, "The trees don't produce fruit because they're proud of the fruit. They produce it because that's what they are. The fruit is just what happens when something grows the way it was meant to grow." Think about that for a moment. Have you ever in your life done something not for what it would earn you, not for how it would make you appear, but simply because it was what you were meant to do? Aldrich rode back to the palace in silence that evening. The stars were coming out over the valley. He did not have an answer to the farmer's question. And that bothered him more than anything had bothered him in years. Remember the question at the beginning of this story, whether you have ever been so certain that you stopped listening? Hold that question close, because what Aldrich did next is where the answer begins to form. In the weeks that followed, something subtle began to shift. Aldrich went back to the farmstead 3 more times. He did not announce himself. He simply rode out and sat on the log and drank tea. And Doran spoke when he had something to say and was quiet when he didn't, which was unusual enough in the palace world that Aldrich found it almost startling each time. During one of those visits, Doran told him about a well. He said, "There was a man in my grandfather's village who wanted to be respected more than anything. He wanted people to point at him when he walked through the market and say, "There goes the important one." So he built a well in the center of the village, not because people needed water, they already had the river, but so people would see him build it and remember that he had. And the well was beautiful. But the river dried up that summer, and the village survived on that well. And the man had done a good thing entirely for a wrong reason, and it remained a good thing. He never quite understood that. He kept waiting for the gratitude to feel like what he had imagined it would feel like. It never did. Aldrich said, "What did he imagine it would feel like?" Doran looked at him steadily and said, "Complete." He imagined it would make him feel complete. But you cannot fill that particular hole from the outside. The fruit does not fall from a proud tree. It falls from a whole one. Aldrich said those words to himself, walking back to his horse. He said them again that night. He was beginning to understand something, but understanding and accepting are two very different things, and the hardest part was still ahead. Because 3 weeks after that conversation, Aldrich did something he had never done in 22 years of rule. He called his full council together, and instead of presenting his decisions for ratification, he said, "I want to hear from each of you what is not working. Not what I'm doing right. What am I missing?" There was a silence in the council chamber that lasted long enough to become uncomfortable. And then his oldest advisor, a man named Farron, who had served Aldrich's father before him and who had spent 22 years choosing his words with extraordinary care, said quietly, "You are brilliant at building things, my king. You are not always present for the people inside them." No one breathed. Aldrich looked at Farron for a long moment. Then he said, "Tell me more." That was the moment. Not the dramatic one, not the one anyone would put in a history book. Just a king saying 2 words he had never said before. "Tell me more." And the room changed. The fruit does not fall from a proud tree. It falls from a whole one. The months that followed were not easy. Humility, real humility, is not a single decision. It is a practice, like learning to use a new hand. There were council meetings where Aldrich caught himself about to finish someone's sentence and stopped, and the effort of stopping sometimes left him sitting very still for a moment, jaw tight, before he managed to say, "Please continue." There were mornings when the old certainty rose in him like a tide, and he had to sit with it and ask himself, is this wisdom or is this pride dressed as wisdom? The two feel remarkably similar from the inside. He made mistakes during this time that he would not have made before, because before, he had simply decided, and now he was consulting. And consultation is slower and messier, and sometimes leads you somewhere unexpected. His son Cale noticed. He came to Aldrich one evening and said, "Father, you seem different. Not worse, different." Aldrich looked at his son for a moment and said, "I have been learning something I should have learned a long time ago." Cale asked, "What?" Aldrich thought for a moment and then said, "That a full barn does not make a good meal taste better." His son nodded slowly, the way young people nod when they do not quite understand something but sense that one day they will. And then came the winter, and with it a flood. Not the catastrophic flooding that the dam had been built to prevent, but a series of smaller floods in the northern villages that had been made worse by drainage channels that had not been maintained. Aldrich rode north himself, without ceremony, with only 3 attendants, and he spent 4 days in the flooded villages helping coordinate the response. He sat in farmers' houses and drank their tea and listened to what they needed, not what he thought they needed. And on the last evening, an old woman in a village called Heron's Ford offered him her chair by the fire, the best seat in the house. And when he sat down, she brought him a bowl of soup and said, "You are the first one from the capital who came here to listen." He held that bowl of soup and felt something he had not felt in years. Not power, not authority, not the satisfaction of a thing accomplished. Just belonging. The simple, quiet sense of being a person among people. He thought of Doran's words. The fruit does not fall from a proud tree. It falls from a whole one. He understood now what had been missing, not from his kingdom, from himself. Now, I want to speak to you, not to a king to you. Perhaps you have never ruled a kingdom, but perhaps you know what it is to be so certain of your own way of seeing things that the people around you began to feel like obstacles rather than companions. Perhaps you have sat in a meeting and found yourself impatient with someone who was speaking slowly because you had already decided what they were going to say. Perhaps there is someone in your life, a parent, a partner, a colleague, a child, who stopped bringing you their real thoughts a long time ago? Because somewhere along the way, they understood that you had already made up your mind. And perhaps you have not let yourself see that clearly until just now. Here is what this story is really about. First, pride is not the same as confidence. Confidence says, I can do this. Pride says, I am better than you. One builds, the other walls you in. You can be skilled and accomplished and capable without building a wall between yourself and the people who are trying to love you and work alongside you. Second, the people who know the most important things are not always in the important rooms. Aldrich had advisors with titles, and generals with experience, and scholars with libraries. But the thing that changed him came from a man sitting on a log with a clay cup of tea. The wisdom you need is rarely where you expect it, which means you have to be looking. You have to be genuinely looking. Third, real power is not the ability to make people listen to you. It is the willingness to listen to them. The most powerful thing Aldrich did in 22 years of rule was not the dam, not the roads, not the library. It was 2 words, tell me more. And those 2 words, said once, sincerely, opened something that no amount of achievement had been able to open. The fruit does not fall from a proud tree. It falls from a whole one. Now I want to ask you something, and I hope you will take a moment to be honest with yourself. Is there someone in your life right now who has stopped bringing you their real thoughts? Someone who gives you the short answer, the safe answer, the answer they think you want because somewhere along the way you made it clear, without meaning to, that their full thoughts were not welcome? Write it in the comments if you feel moved to. Not their name, just the situation. Because someone reading your words tonight might recognize themselves in them, and that recognition might be exactly what they need. If you know someone who is carrying this, someone whose pride has become a wall they can no longer see past, send them this story. Not with a message, not with an explanation. Just send it. Let it do what words between people sometimes cannot. And if these stories speak to something in you, if you find yourself here because you are looking for the kind of wisdom that holds when life becomes difficult, then stay close. Every story shared in this place is made for one reason: to remind you that the most important things you will ever build are not made of stone or marble or achievement. They are made of the moments when you sat down, set aside what you already knew, and said to another person, tell me more.